Welcome to Buildings Week. My name is John Mollenhauer, and I'm the President and CEO of the Toronto Construction Association. This year is unique, of course, very different times with a global pandemic, but we are excited about the week that begins now. You will enjoy something unique this year in that it's virtual, but what was the Buildings Show and BUIDLEX Alberta are actually coming together on a national platform that virtually connects this year. We expect more than 70,000 design, construction, and real estate professionals across Canada, which will be fun and unique. It is, after all, the 21st century, so there isn't anything that can't be done virtually that was formerly done in person. We're excited about the show. There are lots of project opportunities. There's lots of targeted networking and really relevant insights from industry professionals that you will very much enjoy. So here to get us started is Brian Endicott, who will introduce our keynote speaker. Again, welcome.
Welcome to Buildings Week, a virtual event. My name is Brian Endicott, and I am the 2020 Chairman of the Toronto Construction Association. Today's keynote address is sponsored and powered by ConstructConnect Canada and the Toronto Construction Association. ConstructConnect is a leading-edge global company providing pre-construction and construction digital services for our industry, while the Toronto Construction Association is Canada's oldest mixed-trade construction association. This year has been like no other. With the pandemic, along with anti-racism protests, our world has been turned upside down and continues to be impacted by these events. Our industry is not immune to being challenged by various disruptions that increase risks and impact margins, all the while moving forward with digitization, technology, and data collection. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Geoff Smith, CEO and President of EllisDon Construction Corporation. As the head of a $5 billion a year cradle-to-grave company, his presentation will provide you with insights into topics that are of critical importance for our industry.
All right. Thanks, Brian, wherever you are. And hello, everyone. Nice to be here. Nice to meet you all, even if it's a little weird, but what the hell. By the way, just so you know, when I'm recording this, it's November the 4th. They're still counting ballots in Michigan. So you guys are a month on. I hope we all survived. I want to talk a little bit about our industry. I think we sometimes forget the fact that we're a $200 billion industry, a $300 billion industry in a $2 trillion economy. We're 15% more or less, maybe a little less, of the GDP in this country. I don't think we get the respect we deserve, but maybe we haven't earned the respect that we should be getting. But before I get there, I need to talk about racism, because we need to face the fact that we've got a problem here. Firstly, it's a very serious problem of a few really ugly people who are having, with their nooses and their graffiti, a very traumatic impact on black and racialized people on our job sites and in the industry right now. But we also need to face the fact that this industry is far too white and has been for a long time, and that there is a thing, therefore, even in the best case scenario, of unconscious bias, and therefore we have systemic racism in this industry. But we don't have the best case scenario. I am certain there is a small but active white supremacist group active on too many of our job sites, and they are becoming more emboldened. The racist graffiti I've seen recently is the worst I've ever seen. So obviously I'm calling on everyone to do everything you can in the short term. We got to get rid of this graffiti. We got to be extra vigilant. and in the long term around systemic racism to rid our industry of this scourge. We need the construction industry to look like Canada as soon as possible. We need more BIPOC-owned construction businesses. We need BIPOC-targeted apprenticeships. We need BIPOC executives. We need to set and achieve measurable targets on all of this, and we need to get moving now. I hope we'll all be hearing more about this in the coming months, but we've got to get going. So thanks for that. Okay, the last time John Mollenhauer asked me to make a speech, it was 2009. And if you may remember, the world was falling apart. Then I don't hear from John for 11 years, and he calls me a few weeks ago and asks me to make a speech again. So the world must be falling apart. I feel like I'm the angel of death or something. Last time, it was the height of fear of if you remember, the Great Recession. And John wanted me to talk about how we were coping. So I began the speech, I remember clearly, by pulling a bottle of Jack Daniels, a Mickey of Jack Daniels out of my jacket and taking a swig, and said it was as good a strategy as any. So we don't do that anymore. I got edibles now. It's a better world. But obviously we're living in a crazy time. John gave me a fun list of topics. He said, talk about COVID. Talk about how work will be drying up for a lot of firms in the next year because of what's happening out there. And conversely, how there's a skilled labor shortage. Talk about industry consolidation, digitization. Geoff, just, like solve all of those problems. So that ain't gonna happen. But here's the only good news I think I can give you. One thing is, if you're feeling a bit panicky about the future because you just don't know, because you just can't figure it out, I think at this moment, for the first time ever, nobody knows. Nobody's even pretending to know. Not the think tanks, not the consultants, not the politicians, not the banks, certainly not the keynote speakers. So I'm not going to try and give you, the prospects for retail construction across Canada or the future of the downtown. The cool thing is that right now, your prediction is as good as any bank CEO's. And so I think nobody has any edge over anybody else right now, period, anywhere, up and down the chain. Every day is a brand new day when nobody knows. So that's not entirely bad if you're an entrepreneur, right, in the construction industry. So it's a messed up time. I was thinking of a story about EllisDon because it messed us up about 10 years ago, or 7 or 8 years ago, I think. I'll tell you about. One of our directors came to me and said, Geoff, I want you, because she taught at Rotman at U of T, she said, can you have a couple of groups of our executive MBA classes look at EllisDon and tear it up, but you know the drill, and they tell you where you're good and where you're bad. So I said, okay. So they went away, all these geniuses, and they had a real look at us. And they came back about 3 weeks later, and they made a presentation to our management team and to several of the members of our board of directors. And we were doing pretty well then. And so we were feeling pretty smug. We thought things were good, maybe kind of like we all felt last February. And here's what they said. They said, EllisDon, you're toast. Seriously, full stop. There is no place for you in the market going forward. The problem with your company is you're too small, you're too big to be small, meaning you have no niche, you have no specialty, you have nothing you can rely on. And you're too small to be big. You can't compete against the multinationals and the big firms that are coming this way. So that's it. And so I said, I had the whole management team there. I was in a bit of a panic. I said, so what do we do? What do you recommend that we do? And they said, sell. Your only hope for survival is to sell the company. So it was an experience, I have to tell you, that still kind of haunts me. And the reason I mention it now is that in this new kind of unknown world that we're in, that mushy middle that they were warning me about and condemning me to is no place for anyone. And all of us going forward, I think, may have to just pick our place. I got this one gem from the management guru. You may be heard of Peter Drucker. He said, if you don't have a sustainable competitive edge, then don't bother competing. And it just seems to me that if no one has a clue what's next, well, in hell, it may not be the worst time to just step back and ask yourself that question. If consolidation and digitization and modular and manufacturing, now COVID, are upending our industry, then we all may have to recreate ourselves. Or at least have our running shoes on and be agile, because the answer may just have to emerge. But things are changing clearly. There's terrific risk, there's terrific opportunity. I've got two stories. That was my first one, here's my second one. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was addressing a group of about 150 CEOs they gave me 5 minutes on the future, the direction of the construction industry. And my major point was that after 50 years of no productivity improvements in our industry, right now, 3 years ago, the combined impact of IT, of management software, of manufacturing, of AI analytics, meant that construction was about to enter, and is about to enter, a productivity boom. And I boldly predicted that construction costs 10 years from now would, in real dollars, be 20% lower than they are today. It's what happened next that was the interesting part. In the Q&A that came right after, Paul Douglas, whom you'll all know, the ex-CEO of PCL, got up, and in front of all these people, remember these are all both of our clients, told everybody that I was full of shit. And said, listen, Geoff, everybody knows that the cost of construction always follows the CPI, and it always will, and thanks very much for your comments, but you don't know what you're talking about. And listen, I've known Paul a long time. He's a terrific construction leader, and I think he was probably, I have great respect for him. And actually that day, he was probably closer to the truth. I hadn't really taken into account consolidation or labor shortages. So here's to Paul. I think I had more fun at the cocktail party after, but that was something else entirely. But whether he was right or whether I'm right, there's something happening, right? Even forget COVID. There's something happening here, ain't exactly clear. But what I'm going to suggest to you is that we need to find a way to make sure that we happen to it before it happens to us. So I want to just touch on 3 issues that are burning my brain up recently: consolidation in the industry, margins and risk, and digitization. I'm going to make 4 points only. Maybe I can convince you of one of them. I'll start with consolidation. I waited for it for years. Now all of a sudden it seems to be transforming the industry. We see generals getting bought, merging, or just plain disappearing. I think EllisDon competed against Van Bots for 20 or 30 years. Then they suddenly were purchased by Carillion, who we competed against for about 6 years, and then they disappeared. Bird and Stuart Olson just merged, of course. We see subs getting bought, sometimes by generals, sometimes they just disappear. We used to have 4 or 5 or 6 M&E trades bidding on all of our projects. Now it's often 2. And of course, I think GFL owns about 75% of the Ontario dirt trade industry right now, right? Market niches are consolidating too. The big projects are getting huge. We see $1.5 billion hospitals. I think the last one we were talking about yesterday, maybe $2.5 billion in Mississauga. We see $10 billion construction projects. We used to bid at EllisDon on all sorts of projects. Now, I don't think we could be competitive on a high school to save our life. But on the bigger jobs, we sometimes have only 2 competitors. We sometimes have 1. On one BC hospital recently, we had exactly no competitors, right? And when on those projects, we sometimes get 2 or 3, maybe 1 subcontract price on the major disciplines. So things are changing fast. Where is it taking us? I have an idealistic side. The idealistic side of me says that it could lead to a complete change in the way we work with our clients and the way construction gets procured. After all, if there aren't that many good suppliers, and I mean that for our clients and for the generals in terms of all the people we have to work with, maybe we better learn to work with the ones we've got. And maybe we can begin to compete on things other than low price, like trust, like capability, like transparency. I really believe that clients and general contractors and all of us would work with only one bidder as long as we know there's complete transparency and fairness on offer. As long as we're delivering value, we don't need the grind. And I think that may be available to us going forward. I think if builders are smart, they will no longer be commodities. But I also think that if they're smart, they'll be more transparent partners, and that will be our sustainable competitive edge. Of course, that's the idealistic side. It's not what, I don't know about you, but it's not what I'm seeing out there, what we're seeing at EllisDon in the short run. We're seeing a harder world than we saw as recently as 2 or 3 years ago. We're seeing the death of trust. We're seeing the relationship-oriented, handshake-based business that we had for so long that I grew up with disappearing. Contracts everywhere are getting tougher. Relationships are getting more litigious. Voices are being raised when it could and should be the other way around. I think which way we go with this in a time of consolidation can largely be up to us. If we insist on fairness, and if we deliver on fairness, I think we can all do very well together. But it can get ugly too. I think we're at that cleaving point right now. Which brings me to my point number 2, margins and relative risk, which are way too low and way too high, respectively. Most specifically on our public sector projects. And don't get me wrong, our friends in the public sector, that the agencies aren't to blame. We are. Contractors like EllisDon and a few others have continually accepted more and more risk for lousy margins too thoughtlessly. So why wouldn't they keep giving it to us? I know that I would. But it's stupid, and hopefully it's over. I've seen enough to know that Canadians are world-class builders. There's no question about that. But we willingly accept the highest risk for the crappiest returns. And just to be clear, I'm not really calling for margins to go way up, although that would be obviously nice. I'm calling for on all of us to force the risks for those returns to come back into balance with the margins. Now, we're starting to hear about these alliance contracts. It's a good thing. I heard about something just a couple of days ago called Quick Start. Heard about that in the public sector. Same kind of idea. That approach will attract more competitors at more moderate fees because the risks will be materially lower. Perfect. So maybe we're headed in the right direction. Although I will also say this. Character all around is far more important than the form of contract. So let us watch who we're contracting with and who we're dealing with and who they hang around with as well. Anyway, let's compete furiously, right? That's the way it works. But not entirely on who will take the most risk for the lowest fee. This industry is being remade. We get the chance to decide how. All right. Digitization, which is way too complex and way too unpredictable for this kind of speech. But here are 2 thoughts humbly submitted. 1, here's what I see. As an industry, and I include EllisDon in this, and I include our clients in this, and probably a lot of you, we all seem to be embracing IT for its ability to enable us to do the same things we've always been doing in the same way, just more efficiently. I'd respectfully suggest to you that's a bad plan. What's happening is that design software is merging with construction software, which is merging with asset management software, which is not just transforming what we do, it's going to transform how we do it and how we play. Buildings are becoming organic operating systems, much more than just the structures they used to be, to keep us warm and dry. They deliver broad experiences and services and vast information. The 70-year-old business model of our industry is changing anyway, even without the disruptive impact of tech. So let me just say this, please. When you're choosing your software, or when you're designing your software, at least keep this possibility in mind, that if you choose it or if you design it to make the past more efficient, you're going to miss the future. Our software doesn't need to design or define the future, but it does need to agree with it. And digitizing 1985 isn't going to cut it. The other point on all this IT stuff, of course, is data. Construction is, we're not a building industry. We're more of an information industry. We're certainly a data-rich industry. Most of the people listening to me go on and on today aren't really builders in the truest sense anyway. We're more leaders of the process of building. So if we're going to transform this non-productive or productivity improving industry, we're going to need all the data we can find and use. So let's stop giving it away, especially for the sake of short-term efficiency goals. When we do that, we're giving away our future, and we'll have to buy it back later at much higher prices. And what we're going to see, what we're already seeing, of course, it's predictable and it's not a bad thing, is that everybody wants to own that data. The clients want to own the data. Certainly we all want to own the data in the industry, and the software firms want to own the data. It's extremely valuable. I have an answer for that. Let's give it to everybody. Let's share it openly with everybody. Let everybody use it, and let the smartest people win. But let's all of us today here in this sort of virtual room just make sure the construction industry is right in the middle of that data game. Frankly, I'd rather give all EllisDons data to my competitors than I would give it to Silicon Valley. And one last thing, I just want to say a few words about COVID, queues, stimulus projects, this whole sort of mess we're in and what's happening. It seems as I stand here today on November the 4th that the construction industry is not going to get much relief from many of our clients, certainly not our public sector clients aren't looking to write any checks on COVID relief. And I see no stimulus package projects coming down the pike that weren't already coming down pre-COVID. The only benefit that I've seen help the industry is CEWS, the emergency wage supplement. And all of that really ended when they changed the rules as of August the 31st. I mentioned earlier that we're an industry that doesn't get the respect it deserves because maybe we haven't fought hard enough for the respect we deserve. This particular fight is both a collective and an individual struggle. Your MPP and MP will take your call, more now so than ever before. So call them, write them a letter, follow up. Politicians will listen to your associations for sure, but they'll listen more carefully to you as individuals, as taxpayers, as business owners and operators. It's my belief that in this second wave, our industry needs an extension to CEWS, to the emergency wage supplement. It's been promised, it just hasn't been delivered. I think on this issue, we should be making ourselves heard right here, right now, individually and collectively. And that's all I really had to say. I hope you all have a great day. It was nice talking to you. I'm going to walk the 10 feet back to my desk now, so I didn't even have to go outside to make this speech. And I hope to see you all in real life someday soon. Thanks very much.
Welcome, everybody. It's been great to hear Geoff speak as usual. He is his awesome self. Anybody who's had an opportunity to hear Geoff speak anywhere in our industry, I'm sure you enjoyed it. If you've seen him before and if you haven't, it's a delight. We have a lot to talk about here. I'm Mark Casaletto. I'm president of ConstructConnect Canada.
And I'm John Mollenhauer, the president of the Toronto Construction Association.
Yeah, and in the next 30 minutes or so, we have the privilege and honor of actually breaking down what Geoff had to say. Anytime Geoff speaks, he provides a lot of insight. So, we got to break it all down, John, see what we can do with that. And he called out some pretty interesting.
I've done this a time or two before, and the good news is Geoff made it crystal clear that any of us is as qualified to talk about what's going on in the world and what the future looks like as bank CEOs. So I'm delighted, Mark, to hear you and I actually qualify this time
You know what the cool thing is, you and I have been doing this for a while. You know, this, for everybody who's listening here, TCA and ConstructConnect have co-hosted a breakfast every Thursday of the Construct Canada show for years. So this year, of course, we needed to go virtual, so we came up with this concept. And the interesting thing is, every year we go through this process, it is literally a very healthy debate on who we should get to speak. But this year, John throws out Geoff Smith, and we go, yeah, Geoff Smith, perfect. And he actually comments on the fact that you call him every time there's the world's falling apart. So I'm glad you suggested it, and it was a very easy decision.
Geoff doesn't take my calls, as you know, unless he has his daughter Geoff Daniels near at hand. I've known Geoff a long time. He obviously has a pretty good perspective from his lofty perch as the head of one of North America's leading general contracting firms, highly respected, global now. But I think what makes Geoff unique is that he's so candid and honest to a fault, calls it like it is. And so it's refreshing, it's appropriate for the interesting and difficult times we are in. And I agree, Mark, Geoff was as good as Geoff always is. And so we're lucky to have him. So Geoff talked a little bit in the beginning of his monologue about the construction industry. He talked about the fact that we need respect. He sounded a little Rodney Dangerfield, I thought, in the first couple of minutes. Said we have to fight for it and earn it, and I certainly agree with that. But he talked about the fact that we ought to have more respect as a $300 billion industry and a $2 trillion economy. And I think we all agree that the industry has historically, including design, been about 13 or 14% of our GDP. So it's a big deal. And Geoff talked about something near and dear for him, and that's racism and a call to action for the industry to develop and achieve measurable targets to make a difference. Maybe we could circle back to that, to a few of the other things he talked about. He had 4 themes he focused on in his keynote speech. One of them was consolidation. And it's, we know what he's talking about. I mean, we'd have 30 more members at TCA were it not for GFL buying everybody. Geoff said they probably have 75% of the dirt trade in Ontario, and that's probably true. He talked about Stuart Olson merging with Bird. He talked about the fact that Van Bots used to be a competitor for years, and then it was Carillion, and then it's no longer either. But Mark, nobody knows consolidation better than you. Your industry's been through all of that. What are your thoughts on consolidation?
Yeah, I mean, the construction industry, if you step back and look at it, it has got all the elements and factors that you would expect to see consolidation. So I'm not surprised somebody like Geoff is calling it out right away. Anytime you have a lot of companies that are margin challenged, where market share is being split by many, many companies, you start to see this need for consolidation. I mean, I've always said, if you've heard me speak before, that companies are living, breathing organisms. They have survival.
I would pay a nickel for every time I've heard you speak.
And John, you've been around for a while. Not like me. I'm a young guy, but you've been around for a while, and you've seen the industry evolve, right? The fact of the matter is there's a lot of companies making less and less margins as the day goes by. So that alone is conducive for consolidation, not indifferent to our industry. We had a lot of companies providing data. So you're right. We experienced it firsthand. And actually, consolidation is good, because what it does is it allows companies to better position themselves on one of the key elements Geoff talked about. Don't be in the mushy middle. Position yourself for competitive advantage or differentiation. So consolidation does that. But I think there's a few unique elements to construction that you don't see in let's say our industry. And, if you've gone to, I sit on the board of the TCA and you hear it at the CCA and all levels of mixed trade and national associations, this whole idea of, for years, we've been talking about succession planning. the industry is made up of a lot of small companies, and succession planning has been an issue. So notwithstanding the dynamics that you see in the industry, a lot of companies, low margin, you saw some unique things in construction, like a lot of small companies, family owned, operated, with very little planning for the future. So again, that's another accelerant for consolidation. So that's one of the many reasons why we're seeing it.
Geoff talked about consolidation and the impacts of consolidation. He talked about two things that I found interesting. He first of all looked at it from his idealistic side, from sort of the perspective of how consolidation might impact things and improve things, and he argued that theoretically what's going on in our world could cause a profound positive impact, where we begin to think of value in a different way. So value isn't always synonymous with low price. Talked about the world from an idealistic perspective means that we begin to recognize value. We begin to attach importance to trust, to capacity, to your capability of actually delivering the project instead of just low price. Transparency. We're looking at alliance contracts. Geoff talked about a couple. He talked about something called Quick Start. That's brand new. But we're certainly all familiar with IPD and with progressive project management, or progressive design build, I guess it's more often called, which is very popular in the US. We're seeing a little bit of it in Canada. These alliance contracts, this collaborative approach, attaches value to transparency and all those things. That's a good thing, I think, for our industry. But the one thing, and Geoff said in the meantime, the real world is hard. It's very difficult. Yeah. What I'm finding, and I'm not sure Geoff hit this point, but I'm finding that as it relates to construction in our industry, there's a bit of an erosion of the middle class. And by that I mean, and Mark, you can relate to this, you've seen economists, you and I both follow a lot of economists, talking about a K recovery. And by a K recovery, they're talking about the large companies getting bigger and the small companies getting smaller. Right. So you can't aggregate large and small companies. There are very different things going on for those two types of companies. And what I'm finding is there's an erosion of the middle class. By that I mean, to get big, you have to invest. So you've got to have a chief estimator. You've got to have business development teams, all of those kinds of things. That's a high cost, makes it difficult to go big. Geoff talked about how big projects are and as an argument for why we consolidate when there are projects that are upwards of 10 billion. But the smaller businesses, and you made the point, Mark, that the mom and pop shops that have no succession plan begin to hurt because there just isn't, and margins are tight. Geoff talked about big companies. I think EllisDon in one case was facing a hospital in BC where they had no competitors. Certainly in the big P3 stuff, there are very few competitors with the wherewithal. That's an argument for consolidation. I mean, the world's becoming...
You know what, John? What I saw there was a recognized leader in one of the largest companies in our space, one of the most recognized companies in our space, like pleading from the pulpit, saying, "Hey, listen, we're a big industry. We punch more than our weight in the Canadian economy." And I was fascinated with his comment about, we deserve more respect, or maybe we need to earn respect. And then he kind of got into how consolidation is changing the industry. And we've talked about it. I mean, our industry is no longer working under the same rules and dynamics that we saw 10 years ago. We had a lot of medium-sized projects that didn't capture the attention of the global population. But now we have mega projects on one hand and a lot of small projects on the other hand. So everybody's positioning around them. And I think the consolidation and the disappearance of the middle class, that mushy middle he talked about, is a reflection of the dynamics in the construction industry. And I think 100%. It's fascinating to me to see a CEO and leader of what we perceive, one of the largest general contractors in Canada saying, "Hey, we're too big to be small, but we're not big enough to compete against these large conglomerates." And that humbleness and that realization, I think, is a really important message. Yeah, it's a really important message. So
Yeah, Geoff talks about being too small to be big. I would like to
Yeah,
be Geoff and be too small to be big.
exactly. Most companies would kill to be
Yeah.
Jeff is, but
I'll
that's
trade places anytime. Yeah. The second theme, margins and relative risk. Your comment about our fiercely competitive industry is kind of a good segue into that. One of the things that characterizes our industry, and Geoff recognizes this, of course, is that we don't appear to follow traditional supply and demand economics. And by that I mean that, we're in one of the most superheated markets in the world, and have been in southwestern Ontario in particular, but in Canada generally, for I think the longest in Toronto. We've got 124 tower cranes. That's 38% of every tower crane in North America. That's a ridiculously high number. And notwithstanding this incredible volume of competition, we all still take jobs with no margin.
And you know what, John, I was when he made that relationship between the industry taking on more and more risk, but accepting lower and lower margins. I know for you personally, that's a big topic. You have a lot of opinions on that. I was really curious to hear what you had to think about that, because that is a dynamic which we know is true. There's a lot of opinions as to why we do that, but what are your thoughts on that? Because I know your history in the construction industry. You have
and I agree with them. We're to blame. So I think that was important. If you hear somebody like Geoff Smith tell the industry, hey, we are to blame for allowing ourselves to allow margins to get completely out of balance with risk. I mean, Mark, you and I pay a fortune for insurance. When we take the risk of a car accident or our house burning down, we pay thousands of dollars a year to an insurance company to accept that risk. But when our clients ask us to accept the risk that they now download increasingly into our contracts, we don't attach any value to that. We cost it the same way we would if we had no risk. And therefore our margins remain low and competitive, fiercely competitive, despite the fact that there is more and more risk that we are now being asked to shoulder. And that's fundamentally wrong. Geoff made that point.
So John, here's the question. Why do we do that? Like, is it because it's an inherently competitive industry, and maybe there's companies out there trying to compete and differentiate on the fact that I'll take more risk at a lower margin? That's how I'll identify myself in the marketplace. Why as an industry, are we accepting those fundamentals?
Well, for a couple of reasons. First, I think our clients, and particularly the public sector, believe that low price is synonymous with best value. In fact, even if they don't believe that, they're constitutionally bound by that, because there are so many rules and regulations around sole sourcing and around how they procure construction that makes it nearly impossible for them to buy construction services on the market without tendering it and going at low price. Geoff talked about alliance contracts at length. IPD and progressive design build are the two best known examples. Even progressive design build, I would argue that most of our audience from across Canada don't know much about that. We're just beginning to see that. Geoff talked about quick start, and I read everything about everything related to construction. I'd never even heard of it. So that's how new it is. And so, of course, Geoff would know about it first. I think most of our audience will be looking that up. But I'm hoping, and Geoff talked about his idealistic side. I have one too. I hope that buyers of construction begin to recognize that what Geoff said is true, that we need to attach more value to trust. Geoff talked about the death of trust, handshake contracts that were around when we were entering the industry and aren't. Our contracts are so tight, we're litigious. He talked about transparency, shared outcomes. We want the same things. You talked about just our ability to deliver what we're being asked to bid. Why is, I mean, we do go through a pre-qualification process, but for the most part, particularly as we enter a skilled labor shortage, how do you know we have the resources and the wherewithal? If you're a mid-sized firm and you have 3 big projects and you're bidding another big project, you probably don't have the capacity to handle another big project. So I think this whole issue of margins and relative risk is a wake-up call. We are an entrepreneurial bunch in construction. Why the hell do we not add margin when risk is transferred? Why don't we add margin when the industry is so busy that we've got enough work? Boots are full. What's wrong with it?
And I think whether it was intended or not, there's a connection between his whole commentary on margins and what he mentioned earlier in his discussion with respect. If we're going to give away our services pretty much at no margin, you'll never earn the respect because, in our industry, what you charge is basically the value. So if you're going to give it away for nothing, you'll never get the respect you deserve. So whether he intended it or not, I think there's a connection there. So.
Well, Mark, I hate to jump around here, but talking about giving it away for nothing, one of the 4 themes that Geoff focused on during his keynote speech was digitization and in the context of the value of data and IT. I think he was talking about you specifically when he talked about software companies. Why are we too stupid to recognize the value of data and we give it to you for nothing and then we got to buy it back?
Listen, I don't want to talk about that. I'd rather talk about the fact that you haven't called him in 11 years.
He picked on me when he said I only call him when the world's falling apart.
Exactly. That's why let's change the topic and talk about that. The reality is, I'm glad he brings it up. I mean, the industry has been talking about digitization and imploring everybody in this industry to get ready for a technological revolution that's happening. And you could argue that our experiences in the last year with COVID are just going to accelerate that trend and change it and morph it into something completely different. I mean, we are, no matter how you slice and dice it, we are in the middle of a digital revolution. And I think, the CEO of one of the largest general contractors in the country called it out, and I'm glad he did. But the fact is, he said something even more important, in my opinion. It wasn't just about digitizing processes that we've been doing for centuries, like literally 100 years. It's not about that. It's about fundamentally changing the way we work and improving productivity, not just taking something we did in 1985 and digitizing the data behind it, but just do it the exact same way because it's safe and it's risk averse. And I'm really happy to call
that's putting lipstick on a pig.
Exactly. So,
said, if we just more efficiently do something we've always done the way we've always done it, then we've really not achieved anything, and we need to think about how to change the process so that the outcomes are improved. And we've done relatively little on that, certainly in Canada.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I think Geoff, being one of the leaders in our industry, says something really important. I think everybody should listen to intently, which is, whether a project starts in an owner's head and ends up with an owner with asset management, and everything in between was worked in isolation historically, up until recently, where all these processes are becoming digitized and they're all connecting to each other. So the information and data capture and the power of all that information. And I think owners are realizing all the information that's gathered and collected along that entire workflow, from idea to design to pre-construction to construction to asset management. There is a wealth of information. So whether it's the software companies, the builders, the owners, we're all realizing that this is a data-rich industry, and organizing and structuring all that data through the workflow is incredibly valuable. And it's a tremendous service.
I remember a conversation you and I had about 8 or 10 years ago. We were talking about how the internet is changing the world, and all this scattered data all across the globe was captured in seconds with this World Wide Web and the internet. And you had me read something, see if I get this right. It was called The Long Tail, and I think it was Chris Robinson, who was the former, well, he wrote for The Economist. He wrote for the Harvard Business Review. He was the editor-in-chief of Wired magazine, which, as you know, is all about emerging technologies. And he said, when he was talking about data, he said it's fast becoming free.
Yeah.
And so it's not just the data. And Geoff said data has great value. I agree, but it's what we do with the data. It's developing tools.
That's the key, man.
We'll come back to it, but TCA spent 2 years looking long and hard at platforms, and we weren't just looking at data. We can generate all kinds of data, an organization our size. It was what tools were created to use the data to help us, and that's why we landed on your project intelligence platform. I'm going to come back to that a little later. What I want to do, I think, is Geoff talked about later in his talk about the skilled labor shortage. And I think that relates directly to this whole notion of innovation and new technologies and embracing new technologies. There's a couple of things I want to talk about. The first is that you and I are both familiar with a report that was produced by McKinsey about 10 or 15 years ago, talked about productivity. And Geoff talked a lot about productivity and how it's remained the same for 50 plus years. And in the last 2 or 3 years, there have been dramatic productivity improvements. In fact, Geoff thought that would translate into lower real costs in construction. And he told a funny story about he and Paul Douglas, who was the former CEO.
That was awesome.
And you know, Paul said, "No, Geoff, you're full of shit. It's actually tied to the CPI, always has been." And of course, they were probably both right. They're two of the most knowledgeable people in the industry. When Paul and Geoff can't agree on something, that says a lot about how little we know about where things are going. But I want to connect it back. So we are an industry that's slow to evolve. We know that. So we don't embrace new technology easily. I'm talking about more construction than design. But we're also an industry that is facing a labor shortage. So BuildForce Canada is probably the most reliable source of data as it relates to our labor shortage. And they're predicting that baby boomers will retire at a very high rate over the next 10 years, and that there'll be about 260,000 people in the Canadian construction industry retire before the end of the decade. And they said in that same report that the new recruits they're projecting will be in the 220 range. So we're talking about a very significant shortfall. So what happens when you have a skilled labor shortage? I think it forces us as an industry, even though we're slow to evolve, it forces us to rethink how we do things. And so we need more now than ever organizations like yours that help us understand what our options might look like as we look for innovations and we look for technology tools that will help us innovate and help us overcome this shortage of skilled labor. If we don't have the resources, then we have to start thinking about off-site sub-assembly and all that stuff. What are your thoughts on the connection between the skilled labor shortage and technology?
Yeah, you know what? Here's the thing. Couple of comments. First off, you're right. Paul and Geoff are right about the trends on productivity costs. One, construction costs historically does follow the consumer price index. The only thing, where I believe Geoff was calling out an important point, is the rate at which construction costs are rising over time is much higher than the CPI, and that suggests productivity issues. And I think so. In essence, they're both right. Now, why is construction inherently less productive than other industries? Well, it's fragmented. It's got an archaic workflow, and it's one of the least digitized industries, according to McKinsey, other than agriculture. So technology is playing an important role, because what's happening is the industry now is, companies like EllisDon and companies big and small are standing up saying, I got a problem. I got more people leaving the workforce than entering it, but yet the demand for construction over time is increasing. And Geoff called that out at the very beginning. We make up a very large part of Canada's GDP. We're recognized as growing faster than Canada's GDP historically, and it's capturing the entire world's notice. This is a robust, long-term, solid bet to invest in this industry if you're in the private sector.
Mark, you just said something important there. You talked about the importance of investing in technology, thinking outside the box, innovation. The key word I want to focus on is invest. The final theme Geoff talked about, and we've got 6 or 7 minutes left, was impacts of COVID. And one of the impacts of COVID, Geoff talked about how desperately we need the help of our government at every level. And he said,
we do.
We need the wage subsidy to continue. And when Geoff's monologue was recorded on November 4th, we did not have at the time the approval of the federal government to extend that wage subsidy. That CEWS program's now through till June. That's good news. That's not enough, but important. Where I was going with this is one of the impacts of COVID, which was his fourth theme, is that we've had to survive a very difficult time. So our capital resources in the construction industry are diminished. And with depleted resources, less money in the bank, we are unable to invest. So there are a few things we can't do. We have to be core certified because our clients are insisting on it and it costs $200,000 or $300,000. We don't have the money. Problem. If we have to invest in new technologies to solve, because we ought to anyway, and we would have had to anyway, it's the exponential era characterized by rapid change, but we would have had to invest. Now we have to invest even more. Now we've got some catch up to do. To innovate, to invest in new technology, to create off-site sub-assembly centers where we can do things differently, all that stuff. And we got no money because of COVID. I think that we are in a little bit of trouble for the next couple of years.
I think with the backdrop that is COVID, John, and what's, basically how next year is setting up, we're coming off an unprecedented, especially in this region, an unprecedented growth period. And there's been a little bit of false sense of security in 2020 with a lot of construction companies because we have such immense backlogs. But kind of looking forward, I think the construction industry is setting up for some tough times because the level of private investments nowhere going to be near it was pre-COVID. And the capacity for the federal government, provincial government, municipal governments to invest at a level which I think would offset that in the short term is going to be challenged. So a lot of companies there's going to be, for example, less projects and more competition for those projects. And then you have other forces like labor shortage and things like that, where, it's a fact. Economic downturns, especially in our industry that's more aged than others, the accelerated rate at which people leave the industry and retire. So when you start to come out of these recessions, you're even more challenged because you have less people than you did before. So you have this almost perfect storm of economic backdrop, pandemic caused by a pandemic, dried up backlogs, technology. So companies are going to be scrambling to find ways to do things better, faster, cheaper. How do I find opportunities quickly? And how do I do more with less? Because my margins are challenged. And I think that's going to be our theme for the foreseeable future. So,
Mark, I'm mindful of the time, and I see that we're winding down a little bit in terms of the time. I want to circle back very quickly to something near and dear to my heart. TCA spent 2 years trying to decide what we've been in the plans room business. We were the first association ever in the electronic plans room business, years before anybody else was in it. We've been doing it a very long time. We recognize that everything's got to be digitized, but we took 2 years before we landed on our strategic partnership with ConstructConnect and the project intelligence platform. And I think that's really relevant, particularly in the context of all the things Geoff was talking about. I want you to just tell me a little bit more about that platform and maybe just how some of the folks listening in can follow up after this talk today to learn more about it.
Yeah, and I listen, credit to you, John, and credit to the TCA for recognizing exactly what Geoff was saying. You know, this is a world there where you're going to be standing inside a newly digitized, completely turned on its head process, or outside. Now, if you're on the inside, it's not necessarily about project and relationships, as we've worked in the past. You know, it's a paperless world where it's not just about the information and the opportunity. It's about the tools you use to do things better, faster, cheaper. And really what I think Geoff was really talking about was the power of the data, which has always been relevant. Data has always been relevant. TCA has been in the data business as long as anybody in our industry in this country. But it's the tools which brings that data to life, which I think is where the transformation's happening. And I think the relationship between the TCA and the data and the software that ConstructConnect provides allows companies now to go forward saying, I can realize the opportunity, I can see the opportunities faster, because what's happening now is not just about grab the data, put it into a database, here you go. It's about the AI behind it, so that you could see
what I like about it is it's changing the way we do things. I mean, one of the things you've done with that platform is as construction industry practitioners, we're looking for project opportunities. Your system is intuitive. You send us stuff and say, we've been following your profile. We know what you like. Here's one you missed. Or the takeoff feature. I mean, if I'm a roofer and I'm getting calls, say I'm getting a call from a homeowner and they want a new roof, I can actually use the takeoff feature in your platform, in your project intelligence platform. And through Google Earth, I can do a quick preliminary takeoff, send it to them 5 minutes after our phone call, and say, the order of magnitude of your new roof will be $12,500. If you want us to refine that quote and you're serious, give us a call and we'll send a guy out. That transforms the way we do things. I love the new platform. How do people watching today have a chance now to go and look at that, maybe get a bit of a demo?
Yeah, and I encourage everybody to do that. I mean, especially if you really take what Geoff said to heart. You know, it's about how do I do more with less, with the, you know, all the challenges that face every company that regardless of who you are in the industry. So in this Buildings Week, both TCA as well as ConstructConnect are doing virtual demos of the TCA plan room and the ConstructConnect platform. So immediately following this discussion, you'll see a URL, and I encourage you to sign up for a demo and take advantage of this opportunity, because quite frankly, you know, it's not about just being in the construction industry. You have to embed yourself in this digital workflow and utilize tools, because at the end of the day, it's about doing things better, faster, and cheaper. And if you don't,
Mark, as you pointed out, I'm old. In fact, you know, someplace reporters said older even than Geoff. But I've also been around the industry a long time. I've never seen anything so dynamic and so much needed as the ConstructConnect project intelligence platform. And my enthusiasm and passion for that was reflected in our board unanimously picking that platform and a strategic partnership with ConstructConnect, which I'm really excited about that. So I encourage people to go to that. As we wrap up here today, again, I think it's important that we thank Geoff Smith. I've known Geoff a long time. EllisDon is one of Canada's great companies. As Canadians, we should be proud of what we've achieved internationally, and I'm very proud to be associated with a company like EllisDon. And I think Geoff's right. Canadians are world-class builders.
Yep.
And as the world becomes flat and opportunities occur inside and outside our borders, the borders kind of eliminate or disappear. I love to see companies do a little of that, and I love that Geoff was so honest with us. You know, if he doesn't know the answer to something, he says so. That's refreshing.
Yeah, no, any opportunity here to hear Geoff and leaders at his level speak and give us insights, it's valuable. And my only encouragement to you, John, is don't wait 11 years to call him again when the world falls apart. We got to hear him more. He's got to get out there.
Hey, Mark, 11 years from now, I ain't working. Yeah, I'm looking 10, but not 11. You know what, Mark? It's always fun. You and I have fun doing these things. I can't think of any two people that read more than you and I do. And we have constant debates about the economy and the industry, and it's fun and it's informative. And I always appreciate how knowledgeable you are. For somebody that's in the software business, you sure know a lot about real estate and construction. And I'm grateful that you and I continue to work together on these things. It's fun as always.
Likewise, John. Always enjoy these debate discussions with you, for sure.
Anyway, folks, enjoy 4 days of insight, project opportunities, and targeted marketing. Our good friends at Informa do an extraordinary job. And I think you'll enjoy the next 4 days. Enjoy.